Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. And welcome to this sort of a special or different kind of a webinar from Digite. As we get settled in, we can also introduce the discussion for today, as well as talk a little bit about what happened. As many of you know, we had Dr. Masa Meda, a longtime friend of Digite, who was going to be part of the webinar today and talk about his experience with Kanban. But he suddenly, had fever and things like that, some illness. And these days, you can't be too careful given the current situation. So we advise him, of course, and he would not have been able to deliver the webinar. So we, in any case, advise that he take rest. And we decided instead to do something different, which we had been toying with for some time in terms of experimenting with. And so this is really a open discussion, open forum, so to speak, where we will discuss about everything Kanban and maybe to some extent Swift Kanban, depending on what the audience interests might be. And the big thing is that it is going to be a conversation between some of us at Digite who are um, involved with our customers as well as involved with our product development and sort of been in the field for more than over 10 years now, I guess. And so before I sort of go down this path too much, let me go ahead and sort of run through a brief set of slides and tell you what the plan is for today. And then we'll go from there. So this is something that we are toying with as the name, Kanban Conversations. If you like it, tell us. If you have other suggestions for us, let us know by the end of the webinar. One of the things that we will do, and so let me go ahead and tell you what we're going to do. So we'll start with some brief introductions to the other person on the panel today with me. And we'll then give you a little bit of an introduction to Digite Swift Kanban, and then we'll get into our sort of discussion. And one of the things that I would like to do is to make sure that those of you who have questions, if you like, we will open up the mic for you, so you can ask the questions on call rather than through the typical Q&A panel that you see. We are recording this session, and I presume that this would be a interesting discussion that you'd like to have a recording for. So we will record it, and we will share the recording with you if you would like to have the recording. Like I said, instead of taking the questions via the questions box, we will take it online on the call. And so hopefully you can participate from wherever you are. The advantage these days is that we are all working from home, so it's a relatively quiet environment for most of us. So we'll go from there. So with that, let me introduce Dr. Ramesh Patel. He's been a long-time CTO for Digite. Ramesh is he's probably one of the most varied personalities that I've seen or I've met or I've known. He was a professor at MIT, and he is an expert on AI and machine learning, as well as on statistics and data science. And he's been a pioneer in terms of the some of the analytics and the statistical aspects of our capabilities in Swift Kanban and Swift TSP. Ramesh, a very warm welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you on the call. Yeah. My name is Mahesh Singh, and I'm co-founder of Digite, and I've run various functions throughout the last 20 years. Currently, I handle marketing at Digite, as well as, of course, for some of you with whom I have been working, I do run training and consulting. Both Ramesh and I have been Kanban coaches, and I've been a trainer for many years now. And so we do have some experience with Kanban, and we hope that today we can respond to some of your questions and learn from some all of you who participate in today's panel to learn from your experience implementing Kanban or your questions related to Kanban. So just before I get started on the actual discussion, A quick word about Digitive for those of you who may not know us very much. We have been in the area of web-based collaborative products in application lifecycle management, project management, lean agile implementations or initiative management, that sort of tooling for since our inception. We are headquartered here in Cupertino, California, which is where I'm based. Ramesh is in LA. Nishant, my colleague who's running this webinar, is in Bangalore, and we have a fairly large base in India. We have nearly 1 million users around the world, but especially in the Americas and in Europe, as well as of course in India. And of course, in terms of our agile offering, actually I should probably no longer say Swift Kanban and Swift Teas here. All our products cover a variety of different agile frameworks or agile methods, and we are constantly sort of trying to do the best in terms of providing the optimal solution to our customers by providing a combination of these tools. And we can talk about that if we need to. Just a little bit about Swift Kanban. So Swift Kanban has been around since we launched it in 2011. Thanks to a serendipitous meeting with David Anderson that I had in a conference that I was attending in the East Coast, actually, in Savannah, Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. And we were already looking at Kanban, and we had kind of started to work on the initial version of the product. And that's when we met David, and that's how we met with the entire community, the Kanban University community. And we've been really blessed to sort of have that association, as a result of which we probably built a product that's really rich in terms of its capabilities as well as in its support for the Kanban method. And those of you who may not have heard of the Kanban method, it's still surprising. Once in a while, we do meet people who may not have heard of the Kanban method, the Blue Book by David Anderson, etc. Highly encourage you to read his Blue Book, and of course, many other book recommendations that we make on our own website as well. So irrespective, just a quick introduction to Swift Kanban. Our predominant use case for Swift Kanban tends to be IT and software. Probably about 70% of our customers or users are software and IT folks, and they use it for software development, IT management, DevOps, all kinds of related applications. But we do have other products, other applications of the product as well, in marketing, in HR, in legal, procurement. Personal Kanban is a big factor in many of the users who use Kanban, and so we have a lot of capability to support various use cases. We are very strong in the visual portfolio management with our capabilities both in Swift Kanban and our ESP, the Enterprise Services Planning module. So, for example, the ability to run cards through a portfolio lane that lets you track automatically the progress of parent level cards or portfolio level cards based on the progress of child cards and different sort of roll-up mechanisms. The ability to define hierarchies which are completely custom to the way that you do your work, in terms of the different objects that you work with, whether it is a epic, story, task type of hierarchy, or whether it's a portfolio, program, project type of a hierarchy. You can build whatever you like. Our ESP module provides this very visual risk management capability that is part of the ESP Enterprise Services Planning body of knowledge that lets you really do your demand shaping and define the right priority, ascribe the right risk profile and priority to different initiatives that you might be doing, and therefore take the right things to be executed at the right time based on what the overall risk appetite is for the organization. And of course, the entire analytics module, which comes with the ESP module, that really lets you predict your performance based on your past data that you have for your own performance, and be able to really use that for becoming a far more predictable organization that you can become than you might be today. We are well known for our analytics capability. We can certainly talk about that based on your experience and your usage of the overall Kanban method. We integrate with a variety of different tools, so we understand that our customers have a variety of different tools already in their project management or ALM ecosystem, and we integrate with a wide range of those tools. And then finally, just this last slide here to give you a sense of who are some of our customers. And you might recognize many of these names. We have customers that range from just tens of 10 and 20 people teams to tens of thousands of customers who use some of our larger products. So with that, we'll go ahead and begin. Ramesh, any opening thoughts from your side in terms of what your experience has been?
Really, I think in the way Agile Manifesto as well as worker empowerment movement in general socially have come about. I think the Kanban thought process is definitely the in thing now, and for the better. So
yeah,
I think
absolutely,
its time is right.
Yes, exactly. All right, so folks, if you have questions, just let us know that you have a question by raising your hand, and there is a hand icon on the panel, and we can go ahead and take those questions. I'm going to just pull up a couple of questions that we received over email. Just give me a second here, and we'll try and address those questions first. All right, so let me see if audience, we have the people concerned. And my apologies if this appears a little spotty. We are sort of doing this for the first time, so do bear with us as we kind of look at these different interfaces here to make sure that we have the questions right. So the first one was from Enrique Shojima from Magalu. Magalu is one of our very strategic and very large customers, Louisa Labs. And I'm just looking to see if Enrique is on the call. Shojima, like here, please say so. And Nishan, maybe you can help me make sure that if somebody is on the call or not, and then we can take from there. So I don't see him on the call. So let me go ahead and see if the other person is there. Brian Copeland had sent us a question. So Brian, I'm going to unmute you, and we can go ahead and discuss the question that you had raised. Hey Brian, can you hear us? And could you let us know if you can talk on the call or not? Brian, can you hear us? Ramesh, you can hear me, right?
Yes. Why don't you just read the question if he's on?
I'm going to go ahead and ask the question that Brian sent, and then hopefully Brian can participate in the call. So Brian's question was, where does Kanban fit in a team adopting Scrum? And is Scrumban a decent hybrid model? Or is it better to stick to either Kanban or Scrum exclusively while in the early stages of an agile transformation? So that's a very interesting and a common topic. Ramesh, you want to take a stab at that first, or shall I give you my perspective? Go ahead and say what you want to say.
Okay, yeah. So I think if I was getting started, I would start with the Scrum as a basis. So you would do all the things Scrum does, define your scope, have a time box, and all of the rituals that go along with it. At the end of your first Scrum, or after a few, you understand what your velocity is, and then onward, the challenge really is controlling the scope, or sort of matching the scope with the capability you have. Okay, that becomes the key challenge. So my experience in doing Scrum has always been that, given the uncertainty in the estimation on the story on a statistical basis, right? Yeah, the stories have a story point, but the story point and actual time associated with it can vary substantially on an individual story basis. So at the end of a sprint, it is not always clear that you will finish what you have taken up. And so what do you do with the things that are hanging? That becomes the question, right?
Struggle for something.
And I have observed the teams that give up and fail are the teams where the manager always keeps saying, guys, you made a commitment, now deliver. Okay? And I've seen this many times. Okay, one time people will burn the midnight oil and finish it. Next time they will do the same thing. But after 10 sprints, the guy's going to say, I don't want this drama every 2 weeks. I go find another job. Right? Because it is very stressful. It is very stressful. And especially if you are in a world like product development, okay, or something that is where the team is stability of the team and the longevity of work is there, you can't be running sprints. You have to run a marathon. Okay. And that is where you can start introducing concepts of Kanban. Firstly, from a management interface perspective, okay, it is extremely important to have time box and a regular delivery. However, the work does not have to start and finish in exactly those boundaries. Every 2 weeks, you reassess what your scope is, you commit what you're going to do, and you deliver 80% of that commitment, okay, on a regular basis. That 20% goes into the next batch and you deliver. In the end, you would have delivered more than what you would deliver by individual sprints, and getting 80% confidence level on your scope statistically is very reasonable, and actually where you can get there quite nicely. And you have what as salespeople would do, I have a goal and I have a stretch goal. Well, the stretch doesn't have to be met.
The safe people would say
in case you're ahead, and if you're not, life is still good, right? So that way you get into Kanban. Going to removing the time box per se requires a very high degree of maturity, not in the team, in the organization. Okay, so I mean, you get there, by the time you get there where you start feeling that I can get rid of time box, you can get rid of time box in small places, but as a full delivery team, you are way mature. You don't need to ask me how to deal with it. That's my my feeling.
That's a great answer. I should. I think I did mention the fact that Ramesh has been a professor, and I think is one of the most gregarious people that I've met. And so I love, Ramesh, your energy and your depth of any kind of response that you give to any topic. So that's great. I'm going to give a little bit of a different response in the sense of the whole sort of I would say the battle between Scrum and Kanban. I'm sure many of you have gone to conferences where there are sessions set up on Scrum versus Kanban, and we, for the longest time, have struggled to emphasize that it is not Scrum versus Kanban. It's really Scrum and Kanban. So the Kanban method is very clear about the fact that it is not by itself a methodology or a framework. It applies on top of whatever you might be doing today. So if you are starting with an agile transformation, of course you're at the very starting point of deciding whether to go with Scrum or Kanban. But and so the question there might be addressed by what Ramesh just talked about. But if you're already doing Scrum and you're deciding whether you should now replace it with Kanban, that's sort of the wrong way to think about it. And it's really that you want to apply the Kanban method principles on top of what you're already doing with Scrum, which would not be too different from, would not be any different from what Ramesh has described. And essentially, Kanban helps you improve whatever you're doing, whether you're doing Scrum or whether you're doing waterfall or you're doing some other method. Kanban will hopefully help you implement, will help you improve whatever it is that you are struggling with, whether it is missed deadlines or missed scope or things like that. Now, as a result of applying Kanban on top of Scrum, if at the end of it you end up having a sort of a hybrid model that appears to be hybrid, you're most welcome to call it Scrumban, and many people do. Or you could leave it as Scrum. It's sort of an improved version of Scrum than what you were doing before you started with Kanban. So that's sort of multiple ways to look at how you want to begin. So let's see. There's another question.
No, can I interject a little bit? Okay.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
now What I didn't mention is if you look at Scrum at scale, okay, like SAFe or LESS or any of these other methodologies, most of them have gone towards giving the team level people a freedom to use any methodology they want, whether it is Scrum or Kanban, except for the fact that they all need to coordinate at a phase boundary or basically time box. So the point is, as long as your interface to the external world from the team perspective can be done as a time box, you have full freedom to figure out how you're going to work internally. For example, for us, I certainly have initiatives and stories, even single story, that I know is going to be more than one Scrum cycle, okay, delivery cycle. I can continue to work on it on my team, on my board. It's not part of delivery. It's okay. Okay, it will be delivered in the batch when it's done. That's my internal thing. It has nothing to do with outside world, and therefore I think there, at a team level, you have a lot of freedom on innovating your methodology. Definitely you need to do retrospectives to figure out what the best thing for you is. So follow the whole philosophy.
Yeah. So the next question is kind of related. So I think you'd be sort of happy to hear it and also respond to it. It's from Jim Brown. Jim, do you want to? I'm going to unmute you if you like to ask the question online. I think you can unmute yourself and.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear us? Okay, great. We can hear you.
Yeah. So when we're talking about spillover, story spillovers, if you know your velocity,
yes,
in a given sprint, should you set aside, or what's the benefit or drawback of setting aside a certain percentage of your story points in the subsequent sprint to take up that spillover and avoid the so-called technical debt? And in the long run, is doing something like that a way to avoid one of these so-called hardening sprints at the end of the show, where you're rushing around and trying to get all your integration testing done and all that type of stuff?
I have a very strong opinion on it, but I would say it's my opinion rather than community consensus. That is exactly what I meant by starting to incorporate Kanban methods in it. Is you have a card on the board, it's gone through 2 of the 5 steps, you leave it exactly where it is. Now, we can figure out what the remaining points on it are based on our historic, you will know how long it's going to take remaining, unit or story point or whatever. So you can reserve that much in the next sprint and allocate the rest. I would much rather follow one hard principle that Kanban has. Finish what you're doing before starting new, right? And that applies here. And I have always believed that whatever you do it right the first time, at least as well as you are capable of doing it, rather than leaving parts of it to come back later and hardening and taking an extra round to do it knowingly. I mean, you will have to do that occasionally because things evolve, change, all that, but not planning to do it as part of your first round of development.
Okay, would that then get in the way of declaring stories so-called done at the end of each sprint, which is supposedly, if
Correct.
you adhere to the manifesto, you're done when you say done at the end of each sprint?
Yes, but
So,
if you rush the story and take on technical debt, are you done?
no, you're not.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, here is the challenge, right? I mean, all of this is argument over, but the ground reality is as follows. No matter what, at least in the software or even generalizing in knowledge industry, no matter how precise your estimation is in this in the estimation of work effort, the effort estimate has a very large variability. Okay. Now, if there is a large variability, the probability that you can take 8 or 10 cards or 5 cards in 2 weeks, which is a fairly short period of time, and guarantee that you will finish all of them every time is very low, very low. Sometimes you might finish early, that's also possible, but to do exactly the right amount of work in right amount of time with a rather poor estimation capability and a small number of cards. If you had said I had 1,000 cards I want to do, I'd say statistically you'll average out, but 5 cards, you're not. It's a small number. So given that reality, one has to figure out what are you going to do with spillover. As I said before, you could whip the dev team into spending extra effort, off-book effort to get work done. And that will work 1 time, 2 time, and if you really had critical delivery, people will actually be more than glad to do that. But on a routine basis, that doesn't work. So you have to figure out what to do with the spill. And my recommendation is redefine the scope.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what I'm fundamentally saying. However, the point here is by taking a stretch goal, I'm making sure that I always have some whip left over so that nobody is sitting idle if they finish early. There's more work to be done. They take over the work, take up the work. If they're not finished, that's okay. They will continue working. Here you measure productivity or your delivery, not on a sprint by sprint basis, but go 4 sprints and say, did I deliver more than the other guys who were following the old principle? Look at it that way. If you look over a longer period of time, I am sure you will be more productive if you have a agreed upon method to deal with spillover. Mm-hmm. As opposed to, every time you have to finish. I mean, that part of manifesto, I think is actually cause for burnout.
Okay. So I don't want to take up the whole conversation here, but would Kanban, when you're in the sprint and you realize that card you're overcommitting on it, mm-hmm. is Kanban a way to refactor that card and then within that sprint say, okay, we have X number of requirements on this card. We can only do 2 or 3 of them. And then if you follow what I'm saying, is Kanban gets you to that lower level, that granular level. Would that be a good application of Kanban within a sprint?
You see, I think that is, at least Mahesh, help me out. I don't think that's part of Kanban. That is perfectly agile way of dealing with things, right? See, the question really now boils down to the part that you're delivering. Does it have a value in terms of delivery right now? If it does, please go ahead and do it. Right? It's very common sense.
But so I was going to say this.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No. Finish what you're saying.
So what I'm saying is, what you have done is finish what you can finish, and continue to work on what is remaining, without kind of putting it back in the backlog and starting going through the whole rigmarole. It's on the board. You keep moving. If you split a card into 2 cards, leave 1 card where it is, and continue with the next card. I mean, the other half that you can finish. Perfectly reasonable.
Okay. I was going to just add to that, Jim. I'd love to learn a little bit more about your context, your organization, etc. but a couple of things. One is I think Kanban does a great job of over a period of time. I think as you sort of get used to some of the principles, to help you look at sort of different classes of work, different classes of service of work that you do. And so it's possible that you might use Kanban to visualize different classes of services and define standard versus expedited versus what is called intangible work, right? Which is not something that's has a huge cost of delay if you didn't do it today, but over a period of time builds up over just like technical debt would build up. And therefore, if you have swim lanes on your Kanban board to make it clear to your team that this is the kind of work that is building up slowly, then it helps you think about your overall sprint scope and how you move from sprint to sprint with that class of service definition as well in the background, so that you can then pick and choose which ones do you want to delay and sort of split and sort of move forward to the next sprint, and which ones you don't want to because of its appropriate class of service, whether because it's expedited or because it's fixed delivery date or things like that. So the class of service helps you sort of classify your backlog slightly better than you might otherwise. And I would think that that may be a good way to deal with some of the challenges that you're talking about here.
Okay, appreciate all your input. Thank you.
So Jim, just a quick sort of parting this thing. What is your? Are you in IT or in software engineering, or what kind of work do you do?
I'm in QA actually.
Okay.
I'm in a university setting. We have used Kanban in other process breakdowns and defining units of work. We've really not applied the Kanban theory within sprints. And that's where I'm kind of trying to get the handle on that. And we do have spillover quite often. And we don't really want to accumulate too much technical debt, but over time, it's almost inevitable that you're gonna do that. Other things in the backlog suddenly take the priority, and then your debt, what your debt is going lower on the list, and the interest payment is getting higher and higher every time it sits there.
Yes.
So that's why I was thinking that Kanban might be a way to sort of break it down in the story way and say, okay, on a risk-based level, what parts of these stories can we get done and make that delivery to say that we're done with these, and then these lower priority requirements or lower risk, requirements can then get put in the backlog and be safer in that realm of technical debt. I don't know if you followed all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we struggle with it ourselves, and I think any product organization has that challenge. And I can tell you one thing, that we, based on our own use of Kanban over the last 7-8 years, the one thing that we have really stopped fretting about is and sort of not meeting sprint scope or not meeting sprint requirements, so to speak, because we know. So we also do although we don't follow let me take that back. I suppose we follow a Scrum-bound model ourselves, which is that we do deliveries every 2 weeks and we make production releases every 2 weeks. But our input, that is the inflow, is continuous. So as we are working on our roadmap and prioritizing what we want to do, we have an upstream Kanban board where we define our overall roadmap, and we are sort of continuously discussing between Ramesh, myself, a couple of other stakeholders in the company. They get prioritized on a continuous basis, and they might move into the dev board on a regular basis. But in terms of the sort of worrying about, hey, is this going to be done within a certain amount of time or not? We know that if it got delayed or if it missed a particular sprint deadline, that it would come out in the next sprint or it would come out in the sprint after that. So we have built a predictability over a period of time that has taken out the discussion about meeting sprint scope or sort of committing and then not meeting those commitments from what it used to be before we adopted Kanban. But at the same time, we have, and Ramesh and I, we discuss all the time about the fact that things that are important from a technical debt perspective, performance or scalability or those kinds of issues, they do tend to build up, and then every now and then we might prioritize those as opposed to the regular features of the product. So quite relatable to your experience. All right, so folks, if there are other questions, please go ahead and raise your hand or maybe ask a question, and then we will open up the mic for you. It would be great to learn from your context as well. Let me, in the meantime, put a question to Ramesh and discuss some of the answers that I have given myself. One of the common challenges that teams that are starting out, they've been working with Kanban for maybe a few years, and now they're looking at adopting a tool. One of the questions that I get asked, Ramesh, quite often is, what does, when you're starting to adopt a tool like of Kanban, or even when you're starting to do Kanban itself, what do you focus on? What is it that you're trying to improve? What is it that you are trying to achieve with Kanban? So what would be your response to what might be pressing problems that teams face that they would benefit immediately from with the use of Kanban?
I mean, the answer is different for people who are doing Kanban, maybe using mechanical board or physical boards, versus people who are not doing Kanban at all. I think, from my perspective, the biggest first, let's focus within the team. Okay, I'm going to go look inside the team. One thing that a visual board makes very clear is what's happening and who's working on what. Okay, which is visibility across the team on a continuous basis. And if you apply to that one simple Kanban principle, and that is to finish what you have started rather than start a new thing. So the number of items on the board, or how many things you're juggling in the kitchen at any given time, automatically get limited because there is limited amount of room on your board. Otherwise, it starts looking ugly. And when the managers walk by and they see a very long queue in front of some, work queue, it gets noted, right? So I think, if nothing else, just that one principle: finish what's on the board before you pull something in, and the fact that everything is visible to everybody internally, and also, if you're comfortable, to people higher up or around other teams that collaborate with you. And then, as I have discovered myself, I have used this ploy very often when my boss always says, hey, this got to get done tomorrow, right? So I would say, take a look at the board and tell me which item should I block to give you the resource. Very simple.
Very effective.
I am going to put it, preempted to do work for my boss on that comment and give you the guy. Start, right? And that conversation, you do it in your own way politely with your manager, suddenly becomes a very important conversation where the managers or others, external parties, feel that they have an ability to reprioritize work in progress, okay? Or they can influence the work. Now, when they can influence the work, they also get the responsibility, because the item that got blocked is also owned by somebody, and that guy is going to get delayed. Understood, right? So then it becomes a consensus on what gets a higher priority. It's not always my priority is better than your priority, right? That conversation can be had. It doesn't solve the problem. So that, just by using those one visual board, and that second is that principle. And thirdly, I would say, is once you go into mechanical, using electronic board, and you start getting some early metrics, then you can actually use those metrics or the CFD or the demand histogram and so on and so forth to have a conversation about policies on prioritization or demand shaping, or basically what you take on, so that your deliveries are happening, quality is good, morale of your team is high. I absolutely must measure that part. And over a period of time, not one sprint, say one quarter, you're actually delivering more.
Yes.
Don't ever measure yourself on one sprint. Measure yourself over 4 sprints, 6 sprints, something like that. That's when you will see that the underlying process, just by doing very simple things, gives you improvement.
So the principle that you are referring to earlier was stop starting, start finishing.
Start finishing,
right?
Yes.
And so that's absolutely one of the most important things that the WIP limits help you do. They really help you limit the amount of multitasking that we are all used to doing as sort of management professionals, so to speak. We pride ourselves in the ability to multitask, and it has shown clearly in the last 15 years or so of research that the more you multitask, the worse we become in terms of delivering work that we are doing, and the quality of the work suffers as well. And of course, everything gets delayed because you have now too many things sitting around on your board, not moving forward because you've taken on too much. One other thing that I would add, a couple of other things that I would add to what Ramesh just said. As you start to look at your performance over a period of 3 or 4 sprints, you start to notice one important thing, that you have a lot of wait times built into your overall flow. And one of the metrics that shows up that dramatically is the flow efficiency metric.
Mm-hmm.
And it tells you really nicely, how much time there is built up in terms of the wait stages of handoffs between the requirements and design, between design and dev, etc., or simply waiting for input from a customer or from a third party or from a different team altogether. So the observation of the Kanban board and the observation of how your flow is happening using the flow efficiency metric dramatically helps you understand how to improve the overall efficiency of the team just by reducing the wait times on your board, if it is possible. For I think almost everybody, besides the visualization of work and seeing your board, seeing your work on a board, which is itself a huge sort of change from what you're used to doing so far. But the added aspect of understanding that there are half a dozen states on your board, which are essentially wait states, queues, where work is waiting and nothing is happening, no value is getting added, is a huge revelation to most teams in terms of understanding the nature of their work. And so that's another aspect of their overall management of work that gets revealed to them, so to speak, by visualizing it on a Kanban board. So in terms of sort of initial things to tackle, overburdening, which Ramesh mentioned, reducing wait states, and then understanding your actual capacity, therefore using that to predict future, what you can deliver, become great sort of initial points to focus on as you start to implement Kanban. So some of the metrics you referred to, Ramesh, I think most teams, when they start to use Kanban, they are already using a cumulative flow diagram. Mm-hmm. And the cumulative flow diagram per se is not a very well understood metric by itself, right? Yes. And I'm sure you've seen that question come up before. So surprisingly, often you hear that comment that even though most people get introduced to the cumulative flow diagram as they start to use Kanban, as they start to implement Kanban, how to read it effectively is still a bit of a challenge or a bit of a mystery to most teams.
Correct.
So you want to talk a little bit about how do you use the cumulative flow diagram more effectively?
Go through the whole seminar on cumulative flow diagram. No, it's effectively very straightforward. Fundamentally, right. If you want to understand the implications, one of the beauty of cumulative flow diagram is it summarizes the entire flow for a period of time. Okay, you've taken a small period of time over which you're drawing. That summarizes everything that happens during that period of time. So in that sense, a single visual, once you're used to it, you look at that visual and you can pick up anomalies. And those anomalies then lead you to other metrics. So it's a very nice summary. Now, here is the thing. It is a curve, it's a graph that starts at a single point and spreads out. And each color band, bottom color band is the number of cards you have completed, but the remaining bands, each band represents the work in that specific queue, and it's left to right, bottom, top to bottom going. Actually, right to left is the best way of saying. From bottom going up is right to left. Okay, so you can see, and now if you had a perfectly smooth, perfectly balanced, almost like a assembly line at Ford Motor Company, all the bands would run parallel to each other all the time, evenly all the time. Okay, everything, because you got 3 minutes to do this and then the next thing, right? That's assembly line. Here, they will fluctuate. However, what you're looking for is they more or less remain within a range and kind of move parallelly to each other and accumulates at the bottom. If that's happening, you're in heaven. Okay. Otherwise, what you notice is something is spreading out or narrowing down, or there is a spike somewhere. Then you need to understand why that's happening. So, and by the way, the slope of the bottom edge, the lowermost region, okay, the slope at the bottom is your delivery rate, and the slope on the top of the top edge is your inflow. Okay, that's pretty much what you see. Actually, if you're showing real, so yeah.
No, yeah, I should have rebooted my machine before I started this anyway.
Yeah, you got too many. Yeah. So anyway, that's how it goes. I'm sure everybody has seen a CFD, so that's not a issue. But the other, I really like to see a few things together. One is the cycle time histogram. Okay.
Yes.
That's a very, and that information, cycle time histogram information, is not in the CFD.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
CFD does not tell you how long a card has been sitting in any given queue. It just tells you how many cards have been sitting in a queue on that day, right? And every day is drawn along the line. So in addition to CFD, cycle time histogram is the next thing you see. You might want to see inflow and outflow, on a daily basis or a weekly basis if you're doing sprint bi-weekly basis or whatever your time frame is, etc., which give you a different perspective on information that's already available in there. The other one is flow efficiency, or work time over wait time breakdown. Okay, whether you do it in Excel or in a graphics or whatever, doesn't matter. What you notice is the fact that the work time and wait time are unrelated. Firstly, they're not correlated. And the wait time, in most cases, if you're using Kanban, tends to dominate. If you're doing sprint, where each individual picks a story and takes it from start to finish, then there is no wait time involved in general. Okay?
Yes.
Very little, if at all.
Unless you're doing things like a review or something like that,
or blockers and so on and so forth. However, if you're doing a customer support thing or many of the Kanban things, wait times dominate. That's one of the reasons why people say estimation, no estimate planning, because the only thing you have to, the estimate is telling you is the total work time, not the total cycle time. So you can plan based, estimation is used to plan work time, not total time. So that's another one of these things that unless you think about it, it's not very clear. Because people tend to equate effort with the duration of it takes to deliver.
Right.
That's a limited number of scenarios where that happens.
Yeah, and folks, it would truly help if I could have been showing you these metrics as Ramesh was talking about it, but somehow my Chrome browser, I was complaining to Ramesh about my Chrome browser before the call, and that has kind of ditched me here. Let me also talk about one other thing that is new in a way in Kanban, and that is the blocker analysis and or blocker clustering, as it is referred to by many people. One of the things that Kanban does really well is to help you highlight work that is blocked because you're depending on an external team or a customer or some external resource that's holding up something that you need to be doing. If you become organized about how you track those blockers and what are the root causes for why your work is getting blocked, you can actually do some very effective blocker analysis or blocker clustering to understand what are the typical types of blockers that your teams face, and that becomes a great way to again understand what are some of the sort of root causes that affect the overall capability that your team has. And so one of the sort of different things that Kanban teams do is to look at blocker clustering or blocker analysis as an additional thing that they may not have been doing earlier, whether with Scrum or whatever be the other method that they were using, in order to understand some of the root causes of sort of problems and the root causes of those problems in their overall work system. So blocker clustering is another one that is a very interesting chart that is provided by Kanban, or at least to my mind, it is infused by the Kanban method. Although, of course, I'm sure the root cause analysis has been a technique that's been used for years. And but the blocker clustering is a great way to understand what are your flow blockers and be able to and enables you to sort of address some of them on a regular basis in your retrospectives or other forums that you might have with your teams. All right, Ramesh, any other pointers in terms of the use of Kanban metrics?
I mean, as I said, rather than I mean, I've done a seminar a couple of years, 3 years ago, I think, at Kanban conference, and the feedback was we're not ready yet. I mean, I can show you the metrics and give you a couple little feel for the type of things, but in general, I think it is important to focus on the first few things, okay? And I can talk more generally about the implications of those things, and so actually. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, go ahead.
How do I do that?
Let's make it present.
Okay. How do I know when I'm the presenter?
You should get a prompt on your screen.
Main screen, no. Screen 2, no. I want to show my Chrome Kanban metrics. Okay. Show this window. Okay, now you're seeing what is equivalent of ESP, but except that it's running on my desktop. Okay. So what you're seeing right down here is the cumulative flow diagram, okay? This is a historical data set which I use for experiment. This was when we were doing kind of roll your own process about 5 or 6 years ago, where our delivery cadence was not a fixed 2-week. We did delivery based on number of cards that
completed,
that would be reasonable for us to update our SaaS offering. Okay, so we kept delivering cards to the done column, and they went on our internal production system, but we did not go to external till we were ready, right? So that's why you see this at the bottom, the blue, you see the bumps over here occasionally, okay? But otherwise, you see the development, this color here is mostly the dev part of it, coding and quality stuff. And that remains more or less constant as you go along, okay? And the bottom few things are validation, you know, the customer validation, and few things get occasionally punched. So this is a CFD, looks pretty good. And you know, the velocity is very clear here if you do look at that, and so on and so forth. In our case, we also tell you what the average aging of a particular queue is, which is an interesting measure because it is a proxy measure of how long cards have been waiting. So sometimes you will see it in a different place occasionally. Okay, so out on the top here, you're seeing cycle time metric, histogram, and these red ones are outliers. But the most important part here is as follows. CFD looks good. All the, you know, there's no place where the cards are backing up, blocking, which you don't need CFD. You can see it on the board as well. The cycle time you do not see on the board. What you want to do is to reduce the variability of cycle time as much as possible. The lower the variability in cycle time, the better your predictability. That is the key, right? So that is the one thing. All these red ones are definitely causing the forecasting to go bananas.
Right.
Literally, if I clip those off and do the forecasting, the forecasts are much more reasonable. So remember that if one lesson is pay attention to the cards that get left behind on the screen. Unless they are, you want to do that, use class of service and move those cards onto a different lane, or at least filter them out when somebody asks you how long will it take for me to do this card.
Correct.
Do your metrics based on class of service, because then within a class of service you want to control the variability, because that is I mean, cycle time is basically the only metric other than delivery date that a manager really cares about, okay, or lead time, right? So control that as much as possible. It is good for the process, good for predictability, good in overall sense. And that's the one you want to control. So
what do you think of the what do you think of the use of the control chart as well to sort of demonstrate exactly what you're just talking about, which is to keep the band narrow and tight, so that the variability across the mean or across the overall spread that you have.
So variability. So here is the CFD version. I mean, ESP version of the control chart, right? The control charts can be done in many different ways. One is parametric, which is how the Six Sigma people do, which is what our standard metrics do, okay, which is 3 standard deviation. The other is non-parametric, and here I'm using Tukey's basically stock market style, you know, non-parametric method to determine where the outliers are. And here the box is telling you what the acceptable 50% mid band is. Okay.
Correct.
So the point here is the scatter diagram tells you what's happening. Actually, I should just go to the development component, and you see the scatter plot, and you see the histogram. I really, if I worked at it, I should have been able to get my cycle times, this from 5 on, I should be able to get rid of if I was a manager paying attention to it. The other thing is there are a lot of things that are 0 and 1, which again suggests that we are mixing. The card sizes are extremely variable. Okay, we have defects that take 15 minutes to 30 minutes to fix on the same board as stories that are supposed to take a week because it's a 2-week sprint, right? So in such cases, you either use something like our this modeling where you can eliminate certain types of classes of service, or put them on a different lane.
Right, or analyze each of the work item types in their own sort of, in their own separate this thing. Great. So I just noticed that we are actually on the at the bottom of the hour, so we are sort of out of time. If there are any other audience questions,
prefer that over other stuff.
In a couple of minutes we can take them. Otherwise, we hope that you enjoyed this discussion, and I plan to have certainly more of these style of discussions rather than just open-ended webinars with many of our guests that we have, as well as the one that I can do with Ramesh, whose insights are, I think, always valuable to any audience. I always enjoy hearing him on a variety of different topics, especially related to Kanban, but certainly any other topic as well. So I'd like to thank all of you for being on this webinar. Our apologies again for the sort of last-minute change of plans because of Masa's health. We wish him well, and of course we expect to see him very soon. As soon as we can reschedule the webinar, we will provide you a date, and we will see during that time. But I hope that you like this format. If you do, and if you're on social media, please let us know, and it will help us again plan these kinds of events in the future. And also, if you have certain topics that you'd like us to cover, we'd love to have your suggestions on those as well. And we hope that these will then provide value not only to you, but also to the overall audience, because I'm sure pretty much everybody faces the kind of issues that we discussed today. Thanks to the people who asked the questions and for the insights we were able to provide based on that discussion. So with that, let me just bring up my last slide here. In case you would like to get in touch with us, you can certainly contact us, and I think you should be able to see my slide now. All right, and other than that, we hope to see you soon in another webinar very shortly. Thanks a lot, and have a great sort of rest of your day or evening, wherever you are. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Ramesh, and
thank you.
Hopefully we'll do this again soon.